Hello, this is Monday, March 3rd, 2015, and this is episode number 40 of the Vanguard Report, and the fourth one that we've done on Google Hangouts. Remember, on the Vanguard Report, we talk about nothing but the feminist problem. Around here, it's feminism, feminism, and feminism. And we break it down into three basic questions. 1. What is feminism? 2. Where do we stand? 3. What is to be done? Anyway, here's a quick thought just to get the show on the road. Is it possible to be an okay, cool, perfectly fine person and yet not be a feminist? Well, now, some feminists would have you believe that if you are not a feminist, then something is critically lacking about you, that you are humanly insufficient or unevolved in some way. For example, Gloria Allred, the feminist lawyer, who says that if you're not a feminist, you're a bigot. And trust me, she's not alone in thinking that way. A lot of feminists think that way. But yes, there are other feminists who would give you to understand that they do not hate non-feminist people, that non-feminist people can be okay people too, that it's okay to not be a feminist. But they don't like to be asked that question, and if you do ask them, they act uncomfortable. They squirm. And I would squirm too if I were balancing on a knife edge, so I can't exactly blame them. Maybe it's more of an intuitional thing on their part, more in the realm of feelings, but it really is a tricky position to be in if you are a feminist. More to the point, it is a slippery slope. Think about it. If you can be a fully sufficient human being without being a feminist also, then I guess that pretty much renders feminism unnecessary, doesn't it? It would mean that feminism serves no special purpose and there is no special need for it. It would be like saying that you can be a fully sufficient human being without being, for example, a Knight of Columbus or a Scientologist. The world could get along fine and dandy if Scientologists or Knights of Columbus suddenly disappeared. And so you would be forced to admit that the world could get along equally fine and dandy if feminism disappeared. Every feminist on earth must sooner or later grapple with this existential crisis that I'm talking about. And that is why, pay attention now, that is why high profiling yourself as a non-feminist, even without openly attacking feminism, is such a powerful thing to do. It forces the issue and helps to bring feminism's existential crisis to a head. That existential crisis. Bring it on. Well, I am Phil Bogan. I am your host for episode number 40 of the Vanguard Report. And my fellow host, Nick Redding, man of Canada, true son of the Alberta Prairie, is with me here as usual. Nick, say hello to the people.
Hey everybody, my name is Nick Redding. I'm with mensrightsedmonton.com. Check out our website, check out our YouTube channel, Men's Rights Edmonton, and you can follow us on Twitter, Men's Rights Ed, at Men's Rights Ed rather. everything I do, including this radio show and the website and the YouTube channel, is to get me in touch with other MRAs, MGTOWs, generally activated non-feminists in the Edmonton area. So if you live in Edmonton, if you live near Edmonton, or if you know somebody who lives near or in Edmonton who's interested in these things, please get in touch with me. You can do so through the website mensrightsedmonton.com. We have a contact us section, which will get you directly in touch with me.
Thank you, Nick. And now, what's the show going to be about tonight? Oh, I don't have a script. I have no idea. No idea what the show's going to be about tonight. I've lost. What am I going to do? Oh, no. Well, let's look at a little story here off the internet. This is from bbc.com. Thought it was rather interesting. Have female prisoner numbers, says Minister Simon Hughes. Have, that's halves, that's like half, like cut in half, kind of, H-A-L-V-E, cut in half or reduced by half the number of female prisoners, says Minister Simon Hughes. Okay, this is from the bbc.com. The number of women being sent to prison should be cut in half, Justice Minister Simon Hughes has said. Female offenders are a, quote, special case and should be treated differently to men because many have been victims themselves, he told BBC Radio 5 Live Breakfast. There are currently around 3,800 women in prison in England and Wales. Further government measures to help stop women ending up in custody are expected to be announced later. Interesting. Government measures to help stop women ending up in custody. Well, that's good that the government wants to take such nice measures for women so that they don't end up in the clutches of the law. How good of the government. There are so many women who ought not to be in prison. About half ought not to be there at all, the minister said. I wonder how many, what percentage or what proportion of men ought not to be there at all. Be an interesting question to look into. Well, anyway, the article continues. I met a woman in her 20s the other day who clearly ought to be sectioned. Her problem is a health problem, not a criminality one. Prisons shouldn't have to cope with that. Yeah, women just need therapy. Men, well, lock them up. Caring responsibilities. When asked why female offenders should be treated differently to men, Mr. Hughes said, women are a special case for very good evidenced reasons. Firstly, many more women who go to prison have themselves been victims. They've often been abused or in violent partnerships.
Yeah, and as we all know, the guys who are the lifers in prison, they had perfectly healthy upbringings. Nobody ever fucked with their heads,
They're not a special case for very good or evidenced reasons. They're just criminals. Okay, very important to understand that. Now, the women's is mo better than the men's. Okay, and the patriarchy knows that. That's why the patriarchy is planning to go easier on women. Well, they already do, don't they, in the sentencing? I mean, women get sentenced less for the same crimes than men. I mean, we've got evidence for that, studies that have shown that. Secondly, says the good minister, secondly, many more women have caring responsibilities than men do. Okay. right. Women are better people. They have more caring responsibilities. Well, you know, if feminism has their way, or at least one branch of feminism, one school of feminism, the caring responsibilities would be portioned out equally between men and women. Okay. So, I mean, this is not heading toward a very feminist future, at least not according to that branch of feminism, but it is heading toward a feminist future, um, you know, as far as, you know, locking up more men and, you know, making men like out to be the bad guys and women to be the good guys. That's also a branch of feminism. But let's not make the mistake of thinking that feminism is rational or self-consistent 100% of the time, because it isn't. Plans to reform the way female offenders are dealt with, hauling together the various agencies which can sometimes be at odds with each other, have been in the pipeline for a while. Yes, they have. We've been hearing for some years now people floating proposals in Great Britain that women should be let out of prison and put into light home-like care facilities rather than prison, like
Well,
Baroness
and
Corsten, for example. Yes.
really that idea isn't so terrible. I think that maybe a lot of women should be put into uh, less uh,
Less punishing
yeah,
situations.
a situation that's less like a cage and more like more like a house arrest on a compound. However, I think the same is true for men. I think that maybe this kinder, gentler touch, this kinder, gentler approach, shouldn't just be restricted to women. I mean, I agree with a lot of what she's saying. There's a lot of women in jail who don't belong there. There's a lot of men in jail who don't belong there.
Hmm.
You
Anybody
know?
heard of the war on drugs?
Exactly. So,
What happens to a young man who gets caught with a bong or a joint in his possession? Well, Nick, I know you can speak for Canada. I don't know much about you know, how it is in the United States, but I know there's a war on drugs, which means a war on anybody who uses drugs. I'm lucky to live in the state of Washington, where you know, things are a little more advanced than in other parts of the USA. But anyway, yeah, Nick, I see your point. You know, maybe some women need to be treated less harshly by the prison system, and maybe so do a lot of men. Just so we go for equality in this context. Hmm.
well, again, you know me and the term equality. You know, I don't put much stock in that concept.
Well, you and I, Nick, are on the same page on that one. But I mean,
But
equality can be used in a limited way if you immediately spell out what you're trying to equalize, and don't
yeah,
just use the word in a totally free floating way.
but in the end, I don't see any reason to reserve these more sophisticated means of rehabilitation for simply female offenders. If you catch my drift.
Oh, I do, I do. Anyway, now up and running in Greater Manchester, the various agencies, police, magistrates, women's centers, prisons, probation, intervene at the point of arrest, sentencing, or release to offer alternatives to custody or to make sure women don't return to prison. Now, they don't plan any of this for men, do they? Because we all know that men are just more violent and that you got to treat men more severely. Those involved say it's helping to reduce reoffending. Justice Minister Simon Hughes wants other English cities and regions to adopt the model. But the question many are asking now is, here we go, Nick, here we go. If it's so successful for women, if it's so successful for women, why can't it be applied to male offenders too? Mr. Hughes said very few women were inside for violent offenses. There are some women who do terrible things and deserve to be locked up for a very long time, he said. My concern is for those who are not a danger to society, who have become caught by a system which then does not help them out of it. Okay, again, it's very good of him to be so concerned about half of the human race there. Mr. Hughes was speaking ahead of an announcement expected to say that a scheme in Manchester to stop women ending up in prison will be rolled out to 6 other areas in England.
Yeah, let me just step in here. What Mr. Hughes said again, it's committing he's committing the exact same fallacy he got called out on, but he's just saying it in a bit more of a erudite manner. Like why doesn't it work for men? Well, some women are really terrible, but a lot of them don't deserve to be there. Well, Mr. Hughes, can't the same thing be said for men? I mean, he didn't provide any information about what men are there for. He just talked about the women. It's just classic deflection and evasion, and just not telling the truth, which someone must necessarily do to
It's
further the
not
feminist
treating
project.
people as individuals. It's not looking at the cases one at a time. It's well, I hate to use this word. It's a feminist word, but I'm going to use this word. It's sexism. Anyway, that's that story. Let's roll on to the next thing. You're going to like this one. This is from the New York Daily News. Columbia University professor who teaches peacekeeping skills to cops and firefighters is charged with assaulting boyfriend. Exclusive. Joanne Bainey, 54, was charged with misdemeanor assault for allegedly slugging Walter Frey, 46, on Valentine's Day because he cheated on her. Oh, that was his Valentine. Well, they Valentined each other pretty well, I guess. Frey is a retired NYPD sergeant. Bainey is a faculty director for a program that teaches FDNY, I guess that would be Fire Department of New York, FDNY and NYPD leaders how to control heated situations. Yeah, it's good to teach firefighters how to control heated situations. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Bainey is a staunch defender of women's rights and an outspoken critic against domestic violence. A college professor who trains city cops and firefighters how to tamp down heated situations was busted on Valentine's Day for delivering an Ivy League beatdown to her Ivy League beatdown to her longtime boyfriend because he cheated on her, officials said. The victim, according to sources, is a retired NYPD sergeant. Joanne Bainey, 54, of Columbia University, alma mater of Mattress Girl, by the way. Columbia University was charged with misdemeanor assault. Bainey was accused of slugging Walter Frey, 46, while he slept inside her Upper West Side apartment about 10:45 p.m., court records show. I hit him because he cheated on me, Bainey told a cop who responded to the Saturday night assault, the court documents show. Well, I guess if he's a retired cop, I guess he couldn't have arrested her. He would have to be a cop on duty to arrest her. I mean, her boyfriend. Frey suffered cuts to his left ear and the right side of his neck. The 5-foot, 125-pound Bainey, that's not a very big person, 5 foot, 125 pound. I would say that's a smallish person. I don't know how big her boyfriend was. The 5-foot, 125-pound Bainey was taken into custody without incident at the luxury West End Avenue building, police said. Bainey is a staunch defender of women's rights and an outspoken critic against domestic violence. Oh, there's a picture of her boyfriend there. I can't see all of him. I can just see his head and shoulders. But boy, he looks like one beefy bruiser. All right. I mean, he looks like a cop.
He also looks significantly aged for someone who's 46.
Well, maybe. I don't know, but I mean, he looks like a guy who can handle himself when things get physical. Maybe I'm wrong. So, and this 5 foot tall, 125-pound woman assaulted him. She was apparently not afraid to go after her big bad cop boyfriend. Okay, I mean, so many people say, well, women are smaller, Well, in this case, that wasn't a factor. It didn't stop her.
Well, because he was asleep.
He was asleep, but still, I mean, asleep or not, I assume he would have woke up, and you can wake up a bear that's hibernating, although I don't recommend it.
Well, I mean, given if anyone's seen my interactions with police on my YouTube channel, and my dad is a retired firefighter, I can tell you that guys in those positions are complete white knights. I can perfectly well imagine him to waking up to being struck, even struck with a weapon, and still just begging her to calm down. Even a hardened, police sergeant like that, a New York police sergeant, who
Hmm.
would still just wake up and just beg her to stop.
I don't
I
know
mean,
about begging her to stop, but to my mind, the significant thing here is the fact that she had no hesitation about ripping into it in the first
yeah,
place.
but that's just it. That's just it. Is it that's
So
knowing
much
knowing
a
knowing that the
poor
person is
fight
not
for
going
a
to
woman.
resist, knowing that the person is not going to resist, despite being twice your size, that factors into a crime like that.
Certainly it does. Certainly it does. And oh, by the way, I can speak from personal experience here. I was once in my life assaulted by a frail little wisp of a girl who was more like 90 pounds and not even 5 feet tall, and she just viciously slammed me against the wall for no reason, other than I might have looked at her a little bit funny. Okay, and she wasn't afraid to do that to me. And
Yeah,
I'm 6 foot tall, and I'm not a skinny little weakling by any means.
and there's more and more of these YouTube videos coming out where even I mean people even like Whoopi Goldberg are commenting on them where women attack men and they do so with complete abandon because they know they can get, or they at least they think that they can get away with it, and they're shocked as hell when they get treated like a man because they act like one.
Yeah.
But you know what? I do like to be charitable to my opponents, and I would like to say that even though this woman did attack a man in his sleep, that still, in my opinion, does not disqualify her from teaching police and fire personnel how to de-escalate a situation. In the article, you can read that people remark that on the one hand, she teaches these people how to calm situations down, while in her personal life, she has a hair trigger. Um, uh,
In her professional life, she's under control, as
yeah,
professional people so often are.
Yeah, and as long as she's reliably relating adequate curriculum, well, that doesn't disqualify her, no matter how much of a nut job she is in her personal life.
Well, the thing here is just the irony of it, the juxtaposition. A person who is in the profession of peace, we are told to believe, and she shows a darker side in her private life. I mean, it does, well, it's suggestive, put it that way. Anyway, so Bainey is asserting her. Wait a minute. Here we go. It's bizarre, said a school source with knowledge of the incident. Her specialty is about communication and building relationships with the public. In reality, she has a hair trigger. Bainey is asserting her innocence, according to her attorney, Stephen Bilkis. We believe when the facts ultimately come to light and are brought out in the court, she is going to be vindicated, Bilkis said. She's very anxious to have her story heard. Okay, well, he's a good lawyer. That's what a good lawyer would say. Bainey is a faculty director of the FDNY Officers Management Institute and sits on the faculty of NYPD's Police Management Institute, which offers professional degrees through Columbia's executive education program. Well, here we go. A feminist in positions of institutional power. I mean, they're all over the place, okay? Just a little, just pointing something out to you all there. Elite FDNY and NYPD personnel who are considered to be the future leaders of their departments are selected for the program, the source said. The professor was released on her own recognizance at her arraignment on Sunday, but a judge authorized an order of protection for Frey. The professor then left town, according to a man at her apartment that identified himself as her brother. It was nothing, he said of the arrest. It's been blown way out of proportion. That's all we have to say. I guess that's her brother talking there. Frey is no stranger to the criminal justice system himself. And boy, this goes on for a ways. There's a bunch of Twitter tweets here, which I'm not going to take the time to read. His NYPD career was irreparably scuttled after he was arrested in 2003 for making harassing phone calls to a nurse in Suffolk County, sources said. After retiring in 2011, he became an investigator and a counterterrorism analyst for the U.S. Navy, according to his LinkedIn page. Frey had very little to say when reached late Tuesday. Don't call here again, he said before hanging up. Yeah, he sounds like one tough cookie, all right. And yet the little woman was not afraid to rip into him. Oh, next. This is really interesting. This is big news. It's a short story, but boy, does it pack a punch. From cnsnews.com, Bachelor Nation, 70%. Oops, my browser just blinked away on me. Let me pull it up again. Bachelor Nation, 70% of men aged 20 to 34 are not married. Boy, I could just stop with that sentence right there. Think about that. Process that. 70% of men aged 20 to 34. 70% of that 14-year age spread are not married. Either they're never married or they're not presently married for one reason or another. 70%. That's a lot. That's a lot. 70%. 70% of American males between the ages of 20 and 34 are not married, and many live in a state of, quote, perpetual adolescence with ominous consequences for the nation's future, says Janice Shaw Krause, author of Marriage Matters. Yes, Nick, you were going to say something.
No, I was saying that's me. I'm 30 years old chronologically, but I'm still basically an 18-year-old.
Nick, you're being hard on yourself. You're a truth warrior, and you're fighting the good fight, and you're laying that trip on yourself because society lays that trip on you. Well, you can disagree with me if you like. Far too many young men have failed to make a normal progression into adult roles of responsibility and self-sufficiency, roles generally associated with marriage and fatherhood. Krause, former executive director of the Beverly LaHaye Institute, wrote in a recent Washington Times op-ed. Well, here we go again with more of the shaming of males, the man-up school of rhetoric here. Not a very nuanced presentation of what's going on, I must say. The high percentage of bachelors means bleak prospects for millions of young women who dream about a wedding day that may never come. Oh dear, they'll never have that special Godzilla, Bridezilla day that they were looking for. It breaks my heart.
I know. That is the biggest tragedy out of all this, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's very, very depressing, Krause told CNSnews.com. They're not understanding how important it is for the culture, for society, for the strength of the nation to have strong families. When he says they're not understanding it, of course, who is the they that he's talking about? Nick, do you know?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Sorry.
They're not understanding how important it is for the culture, for society, for the strength of the nation to have strong families. They're blaming.
Hello?
Men. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
okay. Hold on. Just go on with the show.
Well, the they that they're talking about here is, of course, the men. These men between the ages of 20 and 34 who are not married. It's all their fault because they're too stupid to understand how important it is for culture, for society, and the strength of the nation to have strong families. It's just their fault because they're not understanding this. Of course, this Krauss person has no evidence, has never gone out and interviewed one of these men to find out what they understand or don't understand. But that doesn't matter. They're just not understanding. It must be all their fault. They're just too lazy. They never grew up, and that's why they're not married.
Well, I mean, the most outrageous thing is saying like like that the men don't understand what's so important about this. I mean, if women understood, if it is important, which I think it is, then why is it entirely on the men's shoulders to understand what's going on here? I mean,
Well, men are the bad guys. Men are the problem. Nick, don't you understand that?
you know, does the writer of this has the writer of this article considered that maybe men do
Well,
understand?
it's not the writer of the article. It's the person that was being quoted in the article. But the writer could have taken that into account as well.
Oh, okay. Well, the person being quoted, did they not have they not considered that it's possible that men do understand what's going on here?
I honestly don't think this person has ever considered that. No, I
I
really
mean,
don't.
there's always going to be a balance. Everybody has to find a balance between collectivism and individualism. Um, and there are instances where the individual happiness does have to take priority over collective needs. I'm sorry to say. Um, it is important. But at the same token, it is important to sacrifice individual happiness for the greater for the needs of the greater society, but only if that society is going to
Make it worth your
reciprocate.
while, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I've noticed this. I mean, I hate to sound like whatever. I mean, I keep on bringing up my relationship with my mom and other women on this show, but I mean, in interacting with my mom, trying to tell her about this stuff about like how there's no incentive for men my age to get married to do all this stuff that's typically responsible. She just responds with calling me a Peter Pan. I mean, they cannot. So many women and men cannot contextualize that men, they're people who matter. They can't understand it. They just see us as machines or just things with responsibility.
Disposable utilities, I believe, is the term of art.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're not, it's like a TV. Like if you're not working right, they just come up and smack it. It's unreal.
Well, we've all heard that before. I mean, we know how that goes. Going along here, she pointed out that there's no data to back up the common assertion that a lack of jobs during and after the Great Recession is the primary reason so many young men have been reluctant to tie the knot. The problem with marriage was long before that, she pointed out. And here's a very interesting graph. I'll give you a few tidbits off of the graph here. Ages 35 to 54 in 2013, which is when this survey was made, 35% of men ages 35 to 54 are not married. That's a lot. That's over a third. 35% is still pretty impressive. It's not such a whopper as 70%, but boy, 35%, that's a big bite. 35% of the male population between age 35 and age 54 is not married. Ages 20 to 54, spread this out a bit, give it the maximum spread. from men from ages 20 to 54, 50.5%. Well, basically half of all men between the ages of 20 and 54 are not married. I'd like to see that age spread, going out to something like 80, but they haven't got it here. Let's see. Back in 1966, for men ages 20 through 54, that was 19.3% of them were not married. Nowadays, it's fully half. The group we were talking about originally here, from ages 20 to 34, back in 1966, that was 29.8%. So yes, there has been a dramatic increase all across the board. After decades of feminism, here comes the F word finally. After decades of feminism, Krauss noted that young men are now the ones who set the parameters for intimate relationships. Really, how do young men set the parameters for intimate relationships? That is simply not the case. Those increasingly do not include a wedding ring. Well, they're not getting married, maybe because they don't set the parameters for intimate relationships, and opting out of marriage is the one area where they still have that kind of power. Just a thought. And I know the feminists just yell and scream if you say anything like this, but time was, girls set the cultural mores, the standards, the parameters for intimate activity. The girls were the ones who set those boundaries, and now it's the guys who do, Krauss told CNSnews.com. And it's doubly terrible because the colleges now are predominantly female. Okay, she caught that nuance anyway. So you have some, up to 60% of the student bodies are female, and almost all of them are more than 50% female. And so the ratio of male to female is out of sync. And that means the girls have to live by the guys' demands. Funny how in college the girls can accuse guys of rape and stuff like that, but still somehow the girls, they have to live by the guys' demands. I'd be interested to know how that works out. And that means less romance. They don't date. The girls, I have talked to numerous young women, lament the fact that they don't have the opportunity to dress up and get all pink and frilly and go out for an event. Young women who adhere to a moral code and refuse to participate in the hookup culture are now considered social misfits. Well, that may very well be true in certain settings, Krauss pointed out, and they face even more daunting odds of finding a husband than their promiscuous sisters. Boy, they have the hookup culture, being promiscuous and all of that, and yet somehow it's men who set the parameters for the relationships. I mean, you could argue who sets the parameters kind of both ways there. It's a little more complex, I think. It's really interesting because Mark Regnerus and Jeremy Euchre wrote their book, Premarital Sex in America, 3-4 years ago, and even then they were very concerned about the fact that young women today are not as likely to get married. Well, now it's young women not getting married. Now suddenly that has become the issue. And their prospects, if they are not sexually promiscuous, are really low because the guys, if they can sleep around, they're not interested in going with the girls who don't put out. So again, men are being painted as a bunch of vile reprobates here. Always try to make men look bad, try to put men in the worst possible light. There's a pattern here. The ones who are very serious get married early, and that leaves the majority of the girls. Then by the time they're 25 and into their first jobs, the pickings are very, very slim for them. And Mark Regnerus was very, very clear that the, quote, good girls are the ones who are at risk now in terms of not being able to get married. And according to a 2014 data from the U.S. Census Bureau, 7.9 million opposite-sex couples in the U.S. live together but are not married. A 2014 study by Johns Hopkins University also found that 57% of children born to women aged 26 to 31 are out of wedlock. Now that's not good. Children born out of wedlock, not a good social trend. Not really terribly happy to hear about that. But that seems to be the way things are going. Krauss says the decline in marriage and a corresponding rise in cohabitation is happening despite at least a decade of research demonstrating the societal benefits of two-parent families. Boy, the article goes on quite a bit. I'm going to jump to the end here. Feminism has largely achieved its goal of equality in the workplace, so the movement has lost relevance for young women who are now earning more college and professional degrees than men, she pointed out. However, feminism's effects on the culture, including the historically low marriage rate, will linger for some time to come, she noted. Feminism was supposed to bring women happiness, Krauss said, but the research shows that women today are much more unhappy than they have been in the past. They've ended up with far more opportunities, but their personal happiness is way down. You know, it's hard to sort out there. Is she blaming feminism or just singing a sad song for women? Either way, she's not doing men any favors. And anyway, I thought it was just one hell of a bombshell that 70% of men between the ages of 20 and 34 are not married. I mean, marriage rates have hit an all-time historical rock bottom here. That's really something. And if, excuse me, if present trends continue, it's going to keep dropping and keep dropping, and probably does not bode very well for the future. Yeah, just thought I'd point that out. All right. Let's see, we've got a little time left in the show here. Next item. Feminist writers are so besieged by online abuse that some have begun to retire. You know, like feminists getting pushback from people who have a different opinion. In the media, feminists will say something and non-feminists will jump in there and disagree with them, and I guess that's abuse. Jessica Valenti is one of the most successful and visible feminists of her generation. As a columnist for The Guardian, her face regularly appears on the site's front page. Well, Jessica Valenti is a columnist for The Guardian. How many non-feminist columnists for The Guardian do you have? How many people up there are writing for The Guardian or any other big publication like that have been putting out very openly and expressly the non-feminist perspective? I don't know of one, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong. She has written 5 books, one of which was adapted into a documentary since founding the blog feministing.com. She gives speeches all over the country, and she tells me that because of the nonstop harassment that feminist writers face online, if she could start over, she might prefer to be completely anonymous. I don't know that I would do it under my real name, she says. She tells young women who are interested in writing about feminism. It's not just the physical safety concerns, but the emotional ramifications of constant round.
Oh, Christ. What kind of physical safety concerns?
Well, I don't know. I mean, theoretically, somebody could get mad at her in the physical world.
Has there been a single feminist who has faced any kind of physical safety concern ever since Mark Lapine? Ever?
Well, to hear them talk, you would think, that they did. I mean, Meg Lanker-Simons apparently faced some kind of physical threats. Was it rape threats? Oh, no, she didn't. She made that up. And then there was Anita Sarkeesian, who made up at least one of the major threats against her.
There was Brianna Wu, who was forced out of her house, and while she was announcing that she was forced out of her house, she was clearly sitting inside her house.
Okay.
Once again, it cannot be stressed enough one must necessarily be a compulsive liar to be a feminist. They have to be.
Well, Nick, I would modify that statement a bit. One can be a self-described feminist and not be a compulsive liar. I think a more accurate statement would be that feminism, as a going concern, as an enterprise, absolutely depends upon raping the truth, upon distorting and falsifying things.
Okay, I'll take that on. I'll take that on. You show me someone who identifies as a feminist, and then when they're confronted with facts, says, "Oh wow, I didn't know that," but I'm still going to be a feminist because women have it rough. Or rather, they don't do that. They don't say, "Well, I'm still a feminist because women have it hard." I
Well,
mean,
Nick, I'm trying.
I have concocted a term for those unicorn feminists, as you know.
Yes.
But I mean, the very name suggests that they, by all rights, should not exist in nature.
Yeah, it does make that suggestion. Uh, well, I'm being generous here. I mean, I am leaving open the possibility that there may be such a person out there or persons out there. Obviously, I haven't met all of them. And there's plenty of people out there who describe themselves as feminists who, in theory, might not be compulsive liars. So I can't say for a fact that I know every self-described feminist is a compulsive liar. But yes, I will say that lying is a well-established, well-known behavior of people who describe themselves as feminists, or people who just appear to be feminists without necessarily identifying themselves, because of course a lot of times they're sneaky and they will not identify themselves as feminists. But lying is essential to the feminist enterprise. Falsehood is essential to the feminist enterprise. Feminism,
Well,
either way you look at it, is founded upon lies, and lies
that's
upon lies upon lies.
that's another thing. You keep on talking about self-described feminists. Well, how many racists are self-described racists? Right? I mean, in reality, you hear people saying unbelievably racist shit, and then following it up with, "But I'm totally not a racist."
Oh,
Right?
well,
Really, it's whether or not a person describes himself as a racist really is insignificant. The observer can tell whether or not a person is a racist, whether or not they identify themselves as such. The same goes with feminism. I mean, neither of my parents have come right out and described themselves as feminists, but they really hate it that I'm anti-feminist. Um, my dad, I remember when my parents took me aside and told me that pornography was wrong because it objectified women's bodies. My dad would seethe with anger whenever we drove past a strip joint for that reason. And my dad, not my mom, my dad told me that that pro-lifers were only against abortion because they hated women and they wanted to pass laws that would control their bodies.
it's a non sequitur.
Um,
There's a lot of reasons why a person might be opposed to abortion, and hating women is actually pretty low on the list. As I think about it.
and most pro-lifers are women, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, this kind of all of those talking points, those are all feminist talking points, and all of that dishonesty is so obviously feminist dishonesty. So just because they don't self-describe as feminists doesn't mean they aren't. Just like a person can talk on and on and on about the Jews and then declare that they're not racist, but it's pretty clear that that's exactly what they are.
And I guess a lot of people are ashamed to admit that they're feminists. And so they either will say they're not, or what's more likely, they just won't say anything. They'll just sneak into the conversation of any conversation of a political nature and start taking a certain side in the argument, the feminist side, without ever declaring themselves feminists, without ever coming out and saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm a feminist. Uh, Here's what I think as a feminist." But no, they don't do that. Just like Nick, I'm sure you would agree. Nobody says nobody comes into a conversation and says, "Hey, I'm a racist, and as a racist, here's what I think." Nobody
Well,
would do
the
that.
only person I know who does that is me. because because I'm so tired of getting a racist or getting called a racist. I just simply declare myself as such.
Well, that's kind of like me and you both, Nick. We both declare that we don't care about men's rights. You know?
I mean, not directly. In the end, we care about men's rights because men are human. You and I are more specifically concerned with feminism's wrongs, not specifically because they tread on men, but because they tread on the truth, which is
They tread on the
something
truth. No, Nick,
people.
they tread on me because they do affect me, and I am a man. So it's
But
me
there's
that
plenty of
I'm being selfish here. I'm being self-interested here
indeed.
because I am the class male.
Well, I'm also being self-interested because I I rely on the truth to give me a foothold in reality. And when people
That's a good reason.
do everything they can to mess around with the truth, then it gives me a hard time figuring out what's what.
Yeah, yeah. We need all the reality we can get. Otherwise we don't know up from down or left from right or anything. And that's a pretty tough situation to be in. I mean, eventually you got to know what's really going on. It's in the interest of everybody to know what's really going on. And anyway, so getting back to feminists, yeah, a lot of feminists they don't want to admit that they're feminists, and they will take a feminist side or feminist position in a conversation and argue the feminist side of the argument, and yet never declare themselves feminist. Which also has a lot to do with their arrogance at just believing that feminism is the norm, and they don't even need to say it. There's a lot of reasons, but feminists really need to start identifying themselves and coming out and saying, I'm a feminist, respecting the fact that other people are not feminists, that non-feminism is a real thing in this world, it's a valid thing, and that it's not necessary to be a feminist to be a full and totally sufficient human being. This article is long. I see we got about 5 minutes left in the show, and we're not going to get to all of it. I should have allocated more time earlier in the hour. But the point the article makes here is that a lot of feminists are getting scared. They feel threatened. They feel traumatized. They feel abused by all of the terrible, hurtful, sometimes threatening things that are coming at them from the general public, from the reading public. I mean, they go into the media and they say feminist things, and people are offended by this. And people push back, as people will do when they're offended. And if feminists and social justice warriors and people like that have a right to feel offended about their feelings when their feelings get trodden on, I think that game should be available to anybody. If feminists can feel offended, then non-feminists can just as well feel offended.
Yeah,
Okay?
that article makes me feel threatened, Beetlebogan. We have to do something about it.
Makes you feel threatened. Well, I'll have to think about the threat factor. But basically, something else this article is showing me is that there's a lot of people out there in the world, a lot. I mean, the fact that this article was written in the Washington Post um, kind of gives you the clue that this is a thing. It's really happening. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who know what's up with feminism, and they're starting to push back. I mean, we got some serious numbers out there. And a lot of these people, maybe they do some things, say some things that are over the top. Maybe sometimes maybe they do make genuine threats. I mean, not all threats to a feminist are made up by the feminist. I'm willing to believe that in some cases there really are real threats coming from real people. Okay, just by the law of averages. But it's important to understand that this is happening for a reason. I mean, we're seeing a reaction of people, a broad spectrum of the population across the board, a cross section of human nature. And you're going to get, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're going to get a little bit of everything in there. But all kinds of people are reacting against feminism. And just because some of those people may be bad apples, some of those people may be dangerous or violent, that doesn't mean that, that doesn't, let me put it briefly, it doesn't get feminism off the hook. I mean, bad people can make threats against other bad people. It doesn't make the ones who are threatened any less bad. And the fact that this backlash is coming against feminism, and some of it is maybe toxic, maybe out of line, that doesn't get feminism off the hook. It really doesn't. And I think if we're going to close the show right about now, I think I'd like to close it on that note. Sorry I couldn't have dug into this article any more than I did. I barely skimmed the surface. But anyway, everybody, let's wrap up episode number 40 of the Vanguard Report. Remember, feminism is what we say it is. Nick, anything you want to say before we close out the show?
Yes, this week, in honor of Leonard Nimoy, I would like to remind everyone to live long and prosper, and you do that by living logically.
Well, I think Leonard Nimoy lived long and prospered. Anyway, remember, everybody, feminism is what we say it is. We are the source of reality now. They've had their chance to be the source of reality for half a century. That's it. Their time is up. Feminism is what we say it is. Never forget that. And I'll see you again next week for episode number 41 of the Vanguard Report. Everybody, have a good week.
All right, folks, this is your AVFM radio director, James Huff. We will have our next show in just a few minutes. So hang on and stay tuned for Blue Collar Red Pill.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Blue Collar Red Pill. Dan, are you there?
I am, Jack. Sorry, I had my mic turned off for a second there. How you making out tonight there, Jack?
Doing pretty well, pretty well. Wishing my truck had pontoons on the bottom of it. We've got enough rain down here that we're having some flooding issues. But don't worry, it's supposed to be snowing in the middle of next week. No, I'm sorry, I'll take that back. It's supposed to be snowing in the middle of this week. So, yeah.
Oh, lucky you. Better you than me.
I hear some people up in the northeast part of the U.S. They're getting hammered. But how have you been making out, brother?
We've been doing pretty good. I think we're finally out of that deep freeze cold snap that we had for a bit there. Things seem to be round in the bend, getting ready for spring. I'm hoping as we say goodbye to February and hi to March. So I'm hoping that that goes along well and hurries up. Big things happening. We've got a cafe event on Wednesday, not Thursday. I thought it was Thursday, but actually it's Wednesday this week. About Status of Men Canada. We have Status of Women Canada, so that should be interesting. What else is going on? Other than that, man, just plugging away at things. You're doing well. You're getting used to the slushy Canadian kind of weather.
Yeah. It's we've had more snow this year than since I can remember. It hasn't been a lot. It's only been 2 or 3 inches at a time, but it has snowed more often, I should say. I don't know if everyone got to catch it or not, but I had the honor and privilege of being on Aaron Pizzi and Dean Esme's radio show this weekend. I want to say that was a real pleasure. That was definitely one of the high points of my life so far. Getting to talk with Aaron and everyone, if you get a chance, go over to Paul Elam's YouTube channel. You will find that show over there. I really enjoyed it, and I really want to thank Aaron and Dean for the privilege of being on that show.
That must have been great. That must have been great being on their show. They're two very knowledgeable, diligent advocates for men's human rights and human rights fighters. In general, they're both pillars of the community. So yeah, that must have make sure to head on over to is it Paul's channel that has it?
Yeah, it's Paul and James's channel. They both have it. James Huff's channel. But yeah, it was great, and I enjoyed it. But let's get on with the show here. Now, we have a very special guest tonight. There's some people who say that he crawled out of the pits of hell just to be a thorn in feminists' side. A nice thorn, a very polite thorn, a very well-mannered thorn, but a thorn nonetheless. Some say he has never, not once missed an AVFM radio show. He is someone we all know and we all appreciate. He is Iron John. Iron John, welcome to the show.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Iron John, we can hear you. Welcome to the show there, brother.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the very kind introduction, Jack. It's very thoughtful. I can't say that if I've been to every single Voice for Men show that's ever happened, but I try to get to as many as I possibly can.
Yeah. have called into several shows, and unfortunately, we do not have the time to for callers on this show. But your opinions are always very thoughtful, very well thought out, and bring an interesting perspective to whatever topic that the show host may be discussing. Now, if you would you take us through the story of how you became an MRA and bring us up from that point to now?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's kind of a long story. Probably the best way to go about telling it is just to go back to my childhood, and because that really sets the stage for what happened to me in my transition from blue pill life to red pill life. I was born in the mid-1970s, and just in case anyone's wondering, yes, I am being difficult. I don't intend on giving out legal names or specific dates or locations to protect not only the innocent but the guilty, just for now. So I was born in the mid-1970s. Don't remember much of that. But during the 1980s, I went to Catholic school. I was raised Catholic, a very Catholic family. And I also went to Catholic high school and college during the 1990s. Now, why this is important is that during the 80s and the 90s, the second wave feminists had already infiltrated much of American society, particularly the Catholic Church, and in particular, even more focused in, what the feminists did was to try and recruit as many nuns as possible. And it's only decades now, later, that the Catholic Church is admitting we have got a real problem here on our hands with radical feminist nuns. Well, during the 80s, that was not really acknowledged as a problem just yet. And what the nuns do, besides take care of sick people, is teach children. And I was one of those children during the 80s, and that's when it began for me. I began to see that girls were treated very differently than boys were treated. Boys were often punished. Girls were given a lot more allowances. Boys were perceived as bad. Girls were perceived as being good and right. And this troubled me. And when I complained about it to my parents and to teachers and to friends and coaches, they said, "Hey, Iron John, that's life. Get used to it." Well, I didn't have any intention of doing that. I wasn't really a troublemaker, but I often found ways not to cooperate. And I really couldn't get in any trouble because my parents were very influential in the school and the church that I went to. So frequently, I would disobey my teachers and even fellow classmates who were being used by the teachers to try and take boys down a notch. Let me give you an example. What they frequently did is they would allow girls to do things before the boys, just to show the boys who was more important. One of their favorite things to do was to allow the girls to eat first when everyone was hungry, and to make the boys sit there and watch. So what did I do? I would sneak in food and start eating it at the same time the girls were. So this pattern continued until high school, because in high school was an all-boys school. So there weren't any girls, so a lot of this disappeared for a while. But sometime during the mid-90s, I was in college. And that was a pretty awful time to be a young man in higher education. The internet really had not taken off yet. And there really was not much in the way of a men's movement. And I was a young man with a bright future. I was very popular. I was very well liked. I had made a lot of friends. And that's what made what happened to me next at the hands of the Catholic Church even more horrific, because I was a pretty good kid. I never had been arrested, didn't do drugs, didn't steal things. I was always very well behaved and did my homework like a good boy, nice guy. I crossed paths with a feminist during my junior year in college, and I had no idea what I was dealing with at the time because I was pretty young and pretty naive. But sometime during my junior year, unbeknownst to me, she started in on a campaign a campaign to assassinate my reputation. And the way she did it was by telling and retelling and retelling and retelling a fictional story where I had attempted to rape her and she managed to escape. Not to the police, mind you, but to the house of a friend. She never did bother to get around to talking to the police about that. Can't imagine why. Now, I didn't discover this until my, oh God, almost into my second semester of senior year. It had been going on for almost a year behind my back. And all these people who had really liked me and been my friend couldn't even be bothered to, let me know what was going on. So by the time I found out, it was too late. It was too late to transfer, and I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of forcing me to leave in shame. So I graduated, and it took a terrific toll on my mind. I was never really the same after that, and my family really was not that understanding. They really didn't quite get that I hadn't done anything wrong. They figured I must have, because why would a woman lie about something like that? That was, stuff out of fiction. I came from a pretty small town, a pretty sheltered community, and rape, no, that happened in big cities. That didn't happen in small towns. And a false rape accusation, I mean, why in the world would anyone want to do that? Well, it turned out she had done it before. It had turned out she had done the same thing about a year before to another student, and she had managed to get him expelled. So my opinion is, and the things I'm about to say I can't prove, I'm only guessing based on the facts that I had, was that she went back to the university. And at that point they realized they had made a mistake. They had taken the words of a feminist who was mentally unbalanced as a fact without doing any kind of investigation. And I am willing to bet that they realized if they went after a guy like me without any criminal record at all, the other student would have sued them for everything they were worth. So they did nothing. They pretended nothing happened. They didn't do anything to me, and they just hoped I didn't find out and that I went on with my life. Well, I did find out, and I sort of went on with what was left of my life. By this point, it was the late 90s. The internet was coming of age, and I had to move to a new part of the country to start a new life. There were a lot of people from my hometown, people I had gone to high school with, people who were friends with my family, who had gone to that college or knew people who had gone to that college, and it was devastating. It's very difficult not to be able to really return home again because you're too ashamed of what's being said about you. And so I started a new life somewhere else. So any questions so far? This is where I transition probably from blue pill to red pill.
No, no questions here. Just keep going.
Okay. So around this time, I was told that, well, mister, the fun's over, school's out, it's time to go to work, just get on with your life. Which is really kind of difficult when there's really not much of a life left, but somehow I managed to join the adult world, if you want to call it that. I went out into the working world, and shortly thereafter, while I was trying to put a new life together myself, I had read a lot of books about self-help and self-improvement. I was trying to sort out the mess my mind was in and try and achieve something positive with my life as best I could. And one of the authors I had read, who I like a lot, was called Tony Robbins. And he was very helpful in, setting and achieving goals. He's a very good coach. He writes very interesting books about how people can achieve lots of things. And I got to the end of his book, called Awakening the Giant Within, and I got to the recommended reading list, and I had read all the other books, and they were all fine books, except one. And that book was called The Myth of Male Power by Dr. Warren Farrell. And what I didn't know at the time was Warren Farrell and Tony Robbins were friends. I didn't know anything about Warren Farrell, but I figured the rest of these books are good, so this one's probably good too. I had a little hesitation at seeing the title because I thought, oh, what is this? Male bashing? Is that what this is going to be about? That's what we called it back in the 90s before we had a word like misandry, male bashing. I haven't used that in a long time, incidentally. So I read the book, got the book from the library, and I sat there for about 3 days and I finished the whole thing. And I got to tell you, what an eye-opening that was. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Everything he said was true. And it was so shocking. It was so awakening. I mean, the scales had literally fell from my eyes, and I saw the world for what it was for the first time in my life. In my, I guess, early to mid-20s at that point, around Y2K. And after I finished reading the book, the thought I had was no one is ever going to believe this, even though it's all completely true. So I decided to test that theory. I went out and I started talking to people, friends, family members, coworkers, just anyone I might meet, and the response was all the same. There was no hostility, but people really couldn't care less. It was like they just didn't care about what had happened to men, what was going on with men. So that experiment failed. So I thought about it, and I had this computer at the time, and I had this program on it called America Online, which I really didn't like. But the one thing America Online allowed me to do was search the internet. And I started looking around on the internet, and I noticed there were a lot of people who had put up web pages. And I figured, well, these are people. Somewhere on this planet, there's got to be someone else who's read this book, who's thinking the same things I'm thinking, who's also thinking that, you know what, maybe I'm all alone in the world, and I'd like to find someone else like me. So I did find some people. I was surprised. There weren't many back in those days. This was around 2001 or so. The first guy I came across was called Zed the Zen Priest, and his website was really good. There was a lot of really good stuff there. And I digested it, and the first thing I thought after digesting it is, okay, I probably can't talk to this Warren Farrell guy. He sounds pretty darn important. But this Zed guy, maybe I could talk to him. But I looked and looked and looked, and there wasn't much in the way of contact information. The website was pretty old. I thought, nah, I'm not going to get in touch with him. So I kept looking for other people. Next guy I found was called Nice Guy. And he had written a bunch of letters about the state of American women and his own state. And he also had another name. He called himself Evil Guy. And he wrote all these letters about his experiences and what he went through being a man who was engaged to be married to a horrible woman, and how society completely supported her and not him. And I thought, here's a guy like me. Here's a guy who can see all of these challenges that men have that no one wants to do anything about. And after I got done reading Nice Guy, I finally got the sense that after all I had been through, I wasn't alone anymore. And over time I found more and more people who were like these two guys, Zed and Nice Guy. Incidentally, for those people who missed the original Nice Guy letters back in 2001 when they were first published, you'll be pleased to know that even though they were taken offline years ago, they're being republished in book format this year. So if you never ever got the chance to see it the first time around, you're in for a real treat. This is really, really early stuff in the online manosphere world that you don't want to miss out on. More information will be coming about that in the future. Now, life didn't really go all that well for me. even though I had found some support, I still went to the internet. I still read what these guys were writing, and I kept reading it over and over and over again, just because I couldn't believe that there was people out there who actually thought like I did. So I eventually found more websites. I found a place called Men's News Daily, sometime around 2002, 2003, and another place called mensactivism.org. And I read these every day because there was always something new. There was always some new comment. There was always a new article. There was other people there, and they were there every day too. It wasn't like Zed and Nice Guy who had written stuff and then just kind of left. They were still there. So that was definitely an advancement for me, because now I realized, hey, I can interact with these people. So I started reading these places, and eventually, sometime around 2005 or so, I started posting articles on mensactivism.org. And I also started reading the Nice Guys forum. Now, sometime around 2003, a forum had sprouted up that I wasn't aware of, based on the original writings of Nice Guy. And sometime around 2005, I found it, and I started lurking. So around 2006 or so, I joined up and started posting there. And for the past 10 years or so, I've been reading the Nice Guys forum every day. And for the past 9 years or so, I've been, posting almost daily there. And I have to tell you that Mancoat, which is another name for the Nice Guys forum, was some of the most raw and uncensored stuff I've ever seen on the internet. I mean, even more intense than the Spearhead was back during the early days. And it was there, and it was just amazing that people were that intelligent and that honest and that raw and that uncensored. And I was hooked, and I've been hooked ever since. And the thing is, what people don't quite understand about Mancoat and these other men's issues forums is that at first glance it appears that these guys just hate women. It's just misogyny. What they don't really get is that this is therapy. This is therapy for these guys. It was therapy for me too. And writing all the really unpleasant stuff that I wrote was therapy for me. And now that anger that I had is gone, for the most part. So, let's see, where are we? About 2006. So, that's around the time that I think I really thought of myself as an MRA, because that's when the Duke Lacrosse case happened. And that's when I really, really, really started getting an interest in being involved in the manosphere. The Duke Lacrosse case opened some old wounds for me, stuff I hadn't been able to address because I was just too working too hard at keeping my head above water. And when I saw those 3 lacrosse players, and I saw what our society put them through, it was just horrible. And I think it's that point that I really began to think of myself as an MRA.
So, how did you come to be on, or not be on, but follow a Voice for Men?
Well, a few years later, I think it was around 2008 or 2009, I was on YouTube. YouTube was still pretty new, and I was searching for other MRAs. There weren't a lot of us back in those days. There really weren't. It's amazing how many people are now, and I'm really grateful that so many people are joining the movement. You could count all of us on one hand back then. But there was this guy on YouTube called Paul Elam, and I had heard of Paul from Men's News Daily. I had never talked to him, but I had seen him write enough that I took him seriously, and I saw his videos. And the one phrase that stuck out in my mind was, he said, "What if there was a gender war and men showed up to it?" I thought, that's a very interesting idea, Mr. Elam, but I really don't see it happening. Men are just, they're too cowed, they're too defeated. Feminism has done horrible things to them. just there just aren't enough of us. But I said, still, I like what he has to say. I like his ideas, so I'll keep my eye on him. And I did. And he didn't have a lot of videos, but eventually he put his website up. And I thought, oh, okay, great. Now there's another website, another MRA-style website besides Men's News Daily, which was winding down at that point, and mensactivism.org. There were other ones too, but I wasn't really involved with them. Another one would have been Stand Your Ground, but with all the stuff I was doing at Mancode at the time, I missed my chance for that, unfortunately. So when Paul put up the website, it wasn't all that long afterwards, maybe a year and a half later, that he started doing his radio show. And I thought, this is fantastic. I can hear another MRA speaking live to other MRAs on the show. And this was a really huge leap forward. This was like seeing color television for the first time when all you had ever seen was black and white. I never expected anything like that to happen, and I was amazed by it. And so I became a regular listener. I didn't understand when I first heard the show that there was a chat room you could go to during the shows and talk to other people there. If I had known that right away, I would have done it. But sometime, I guess, late 2011, early 2012, the BTR days, I figured out there was a chat room. And so I went there. And I started talking to people. And this is where my first real involvement with the Voice for Men happened. And then they started doing the Stickam rooms. And I was curious. I was a little bit nervous because I didn't have a video camera. I didn't want them to see me because I was afraid I'd be identified. But I figured, well, they can hear my voice. They don't really know who I am. I'm not going to use my real name. And so I showed up to a lot of those Stickam meetings. And they were pretty good. Everyone turned out to be on the level. I had my doubts. I didn't know who was there. I didn't know any of the people. But for the most part, things worked out okay. And that's where I got involved with the Voice for Men. And probably the rest is history from there. That's where most people would have met me, I think.
Have you ever thought about doing YouTube videos just as a voice, not really an image?
No, I like listening more than talking. This is really the exception for me. Of course, I'm always glad to help with Voice for Men Radio. I love it. I love all the shows. I love coming to all the shows and talking to all the people. It's like a breath of fresh air. For so many years I was alone, and now there are other people, and now I can talk to them. And even though I can't see them, I know that we think alike. I know that our ideas and our goals are similar. And that's a comfort to me. But I don't really consider myself that great of a speaker or a writer that I would feel very confident in doing something like that.
Okay, all right. Dan, do you?
Well, you can call in every 3 days or so and chat it up with the speakers and stuff like that. Yeah. But you couldn't handle a couple of YouTube videos. And, okay, all right.
Well, okay. If they were videos, they'd be really short, and I don't think anyone will watch them. But I don't know. It's just not for me. To each their own, you know.
You call it, yeah. You call in, and you always have some very good questions, and some interesting points of view, and perhaps you should think about expanding upon them with a couple of voices from beyond videos on YouTube.
Well, here's the thing, Danny. If I'm doing a video on YouTube, who am I supposed to ask a question to if it's just me?
Well, you could always just pick a topic and ask and answer your own questions. In other words, ask the question in your head and just put the answer out on video. But there's people out there that are not comfortable doing YouTube videos, and that's fine. And there's always people. The movement needs different people doing different things, and there's one way that a person can be very influential is in the comment sections of mainstream media articles. Posting little comments
We
there.
want videos. 9. We want videos.
Aren't there already enough YouTube videos? I mean, come on. I mean, there's so many YouTube videos. I can't even keep up with all of them. That's fantastic,
actually,
of course, but
actually, that's what we want. We want more and more voices out there speaking, and even though Iron John, you may not be comfortable doing YouTube videos, there's other people out there who can do them and should do them. So we want 1,000 MRAs on YouTube making YouTube videos. We want 10,000 or 20,000 people on Twitter tweeting about men's rights stuff, men's rights issues and things, and calling feminists out. We want 2,000 blogs out there talking about men's rights stuff. We want all these voices, even though they're all saying the same things. Even though there's the old saying, "There's nothing new under the sun." Well, there must probably some new perspectives on stuff, but it's the fact of, if you've got 5 people, no one pays attention. But if you've got 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000, then people start paying attention. But it's okay.
We want to have the non-feminist Woodstock. What we have in mind is misogyny in bed for 400,000 instead of breakfast in bed.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Well, I got to say, I like a lot of YouTube videos. I think that there are some great people on YouTube. There's more and more every day, and I think the area that I do really well at, and I believe people should play to their strengths, is finding them in the first place.
We'll see.
I'm really good at finding new people and bringing them into the fold, and I enjoy doing this. I also like advertising and sharing the work of others. I don't know if I'm very good at it, but I do it a lot. That's part of what I do in the movement.
Well, there you go. That's what, if that's what you're good at and that's what you enjoy doing, then there you go. That's activism right there. Getting people connected. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead. I broke in on you there.
Iron, you're talking. Part of your talk there, or your intro, was about how you stumbled across Paul's old YouTube channel, The Happy Misogynist. And I remember those days. I remember stumbling across the videos. I came into the movement right around that time. And I remember that YouTube was chock full of feminists. You couldn't, every other YouTube video out there was feminism this, feminism that. I am social justice warrior. Hear me bore. That was back in the day. Yeah, I am social justice warrior. Hear me bore. That was back in the day. Now today, it's really there's scarce pickings out there. Every time, at least in my opinion, every time a feminist idiot, pops their head up, it seems to get swatted down by about 5 or 6 non-feminists calling out the idiocy. What do you think?
I think that I agree, and that's something that's really encouraging, because back in the day I used to be one of those guys commenting, but now there are so many other people who do it so much better than I do. I just upvote them because I really can't do better, to be honest. They write a lot better than I do. I mean, I don't even come close.
There's that, but I mean, even in videos, we've got Sargon of geez, I'm gonna really mispronounce and screw up his last name. Sargon there. We've got Goodfella. We've got a whole list of people out there that are just continuous. Oh, Tildeer. There's another one. A whole list of people that are just every time a feminist puts out idiocy, that they're there to expose it and basically have a good laugh at it in the process.
Yeah, I agree. That list grows every day, that list of people who are responding, and that's what's fantastic about the internet, is that it gave people a place where they could be honest, particularly when it comes to men's issues and how they feel about feminism, because it's safe. It's safe to do it here because so many of us are anonymous, and the feminists can't get to us, and I'm sure that drives them up a wall because they're used to being able to destroy people, because they're powerful in real life. But in this life, the only real power is words and logic and evidence, and they don't have that. I mean, they have
Yeah.
words, but it's senseless.
Yeah, they just scream misogynies or you hate women, or they never counter. They just point the finger and scream like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, they
Well,
scream
the thing the feminists.
misogyny.
Oh, I'm
Misogyny.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, mouses.
I was just making a joke.
Or mice, or what? Sure, I understand. The thing about misogyny that the feminists don't quite understand is that it's abnormal. It's not normal. They perceive it to be normal because they're not playing with the full deck of cards. But what they don't understand is that abnormalities can be corrected. And misogyny, when it does exist, is really just a
I
temporary
don't know
state of
there,
mind.
Iron John. I don't know if
No.
abnormalities can be corrected. I've tried to fucking correct feminists, but they just don't seem to fucking, they just seem to want to remain.
Well, this is one. This particular one. I guess I'll qualify my remark. My remark there. Can and does be corrected. And what the feminists don't really notice, because none of them stick around a long time, is a lot of these men's issues forums, like I said, they're like group therapy. A lot of these men come in and they've been hurt very badly, like by women, like I was. And they go through their process of expelling their anger, working through it. But what the feminists don't notice is the turnover. That they don't notice the healing. They don't notice when guys get better because they leave. Most of the people don't stick around long term. The ones that do stick around long term, like myself, end up becoming the therapists, because this is not a job that therapists want, which is why men have to come to the internet.
It's not what therapists want to do. They don't,
No.
that they're feminists, and so they believe men, can't have problems. And if men do have problems, it's because of the patriarchy or toxic masculinity. Anyway, Iron John, what is your views on the feminists here lately? They like to find a rape victim or supposed rape victim and hold them up as their poster child for rape culture, and their that sort of thing. And look what's happening on our college campuses. And the last several ones that they've held up, it turns out, it comes out later on, that they're either lying or their story has more holes than Swiss cheese. What do you see as what effect is that going to have on society as a whole? Is that going to change anything?
In the short term, there's not going to be any change. The charge of rape is so heinous, so horrifying, so shocking, that it doesn't matter if you're innocent or not. It really doesn't. And regardless of what the feminists say, that punishing false accusers of rape will discourage other... No. People are never going to get over the shock of that word. They are never going to become desensitized to it. And the feminists know this, that's why they use it all the time.
That and domestic violence.
Sure.
I just recently saw on Twitter it's making the rounds that now in Australia, the same feminist lie. I think feminists package up their lies and ship them to different parts of the world. But anyway, the same feminist lie that we've been hearing here in the States for God knows how long, that the leading cause of death for women in Australia is domestic violence. And it's being picked up by the mainstream media, and it's going around over there, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you people will believe anything. But what are your thoughts on the whole domestic violence issue? As far as when I was on Aaron Pizzi's and Dean Esme's show the other day, Dean brought up the fact that now Aaron's website, which is whiteribbon.org, has more traffic than any other White Ribbon website. Do you think that we are gaining on this issue? Do you think that the tide is beginning to turn, and that we, in the next 5 or 10 years we will be the ones on the winning side of that, or what do you think?
That is a really tough question. It's a really good question, Jack. Predicting the future is always dangerous business. In terms of domestic violence, the feminists are very well entrenched. They have a lot of support from the government and from society in general. Private benefactors who some genuinely believe that they are helping innocent women. And what we're dealing with here is biology. Men and women alike see women as being vulnerable. I don't think that's ever going to change. What I think we may be able to change is the desire to view women solely as being innocent. And I think the reason that is going to happen is not because of anything men say, but it's going to be from what women have to say about themselves and each other.
Interesting. So you see the women against feminism or the like as being the real game changer over the next few years?
No, I don't think. I think that that's a very nice start. I don't think it's going to be a few years, though. I know people are optimistic. We are making progress as a movement. Things are changing. However, people, and women are just like people, as feminists love to tell us, people generally don't change until they go through a lot of pain. And we're talking about not just individual change, we're talking about society-wide change. That pain hasn't happened yet. And I hate to see human suffering. I know what it's like to suffer. I don't want to cause pain, but this is something that's far beyond my control. It's beyond anyone's control. Now, in the earlier program, Fetal Bogan brought up a statistic. It's one I've noticed as well, with an enormous amount of young men in the United States who are unmarried. 70% of men aged 20 to 34 are now unmarried. And I hate to say this, but I don't think that's enough yet. That is not enough. It's going to have to be upwards of 90%. Women will have to understand that they have lost something they cannot regain. They, for lack of a better word, will have to become a cautionary tale for the future generations. This is something that's at least 2 to 3 decades away, in my opinion. It will take that long to get the rest of young men to opt out of marriage. We've made a lot of progress, but we're not there yet.
Okay, so you're saying that women, just the general population of women, not necessarily feminists, but just women in general, are going to have to going to have to lose some skin before they get the message.
Yeah, and the only way they're going to change is if they realize they have no other option.
What is your opinion on these? The mainstream media has really dialed up its attack on the men's human rights movement. Now, we've seen positive articles come out, but we've seen over the last month or 6 weeks, we've seen a real dial up of negative articles come out against the men's human rights movement. And what is your opinion on that? Why is that happening, and what does it mean?
My opinion is that the reason this is happening is because they have failed in one territory which was hostile to them, and so now they're trying a strategy on friendly territory. The original strategy, and I'm not going to name names or locations, but the people out there know who they are, was to try and redirect traffic from men's issues websites to feminist websites. That didn't work. Because, well, who wants to go to a feminist website when you can get the truth somewhere else? The truth is very habit forming.
That was priceless. Who wants to go to a feminist website when you can get the truth somewhere else?
That was good.
Really, I mean, that's what it came down to. Incentives matter to people. This is the one place where they can go and hear the truth and speak the truth. And what the feminists are offering is counterfeit. Who wants Confederate dollars when you can get U.S. dollars?
Very well put. You think that this is just them trying a different tactic?
Hold on, Jack. You, a Tennessee man, said very well put when Iron John said Confederate dollars. I'd say hand in your Union card, but the irony is just too fucking rich.
Oh, yeah. You damn Canuck. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this whole thing about feminists sort of going on the attack, I don't believe it's going to work. I think it's just going to blow up in their faces. What do you think?
I'm not sure, because what they're doing now is what they've always done, and it's always worked before. So they're not going to have any immediate problems. People are conditioned to respond in a particular way to a particular stimulus, and it's one the feminists have been using successfully for decades. The thing is, we have to remember where our strengths lie, and that is going to be the internet. If we are going to fight them on their territory, and of course, disclaimers here, I don't mean physically, I mean civil disobedience. I mean...
Oh, come on, I want to see the gender wars Mason-Dixon line. Jesus.
Well, I'm all in favor of passive resistance, but
actually, you know what? The internet is now. You know what? I'm going to call it right now. You know what? The internet is the Mason-Dixon line of the gender wars, of the feminist lies versus reality. That's where the rubbers meet in the road. That's the Mason-Dixon line. It's the internet, the comment sections.
It is a shame that we have to go on the internet to get to a place that's real. But, yeah.
Yeah. The only good thing is that their territory is shrinking and ours is expanding. They are still in control of their territory. That is their strength. Our strength is that we can easily encroach upon theirs, most of the time successfully, because we are so concerned about how we behave and act, and we're very careful about documenting all our actions. So there's not a lot they can do to us because we're committed to doing the right thing. So that is really our main advantage, is our commitment to nonviolence, to debate, to clear thinking, critical thinking, argument, facts, evidence, reason. That is where our strengths lie. Now, that's going to be difficult to do it on their territory, but the good news is, like I said, their territory is shrinking and ours is growing. And eventually theirs will be gone almost completely, I think, in the future.
Well, their response, I'm going to say is that it has been for the last little bit to censor things, and now they're complaining because they're getting no platforming of their own speakers. Their own feminists are being censored, and they're complaining. So as soon as we started taking over the comment sections, and by we I mean those of us who like to live in reality, and not in the rape culture fantasy world for profit that feminism puts out there. Those of us who like to live in reality are we basically said enough's enough of this horse shit idiocy that you call fucking activism, which is basically a lie for profit. Wherever you go, be it domestic violence, fucking rape culture for profit, education issues, blah blah blah. Well, instead of society buying those lies hook, line, and sinker, now they're coming out in the comments section and saying, "Liar." You know what? You're a goddamn liar, and we're done with it. You look at the comment sections. Anywhere feminism pops an idiotic position, and all the comment sections are just riddled with people calling out their idiocy.
Yeah, that's encouraging because it shows, I think, the readers, friend and foe alike, that we can count on our people to support us.
You know what?
And that's really what it is about.
I'm also going to build upon that. Look at the difference between how long it took for the Duke lacrosse case to break and how long it took for the UVA hoax story to break. The difference is huge. It was, Christ, how long? It was like, it was about a year before, Duke lacrosse, a year, maybe 2 years before Duke lacrosse got cleared. Within 3 weeks of the Rolling Stone story being broke, it was debunked. So the time difference is huge. And feminists are still stuck with their head in the ground going, la 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 la, we can't hear you because we're hitting our typewriters too hard here, or whatever, we're typing out lies too big for whatever reason. But the time difference is huge.
Yeah, it's things are really beginning to change. There's really, I think, being a shift. I honestly think that society is on the verge of waking up to what is going on. But guys, we are getting close to the end of the show. Iron John, is there any final words that you would have for our listeners?
Well, the only thing I could say is that for anyone who is listening that's worried about their identity, you don't have to compromise it. You can remain closeted like me, and no one will think less of you. But start posting, start commenting, start getting involved. You don't have to lurk forever. It's safer now than it used to be.
Yeah, Yeah, you can go into comment sections on mainstream media articles and comment, and people see that. People read those comment sections, and when a feminist writes an article on a mainstream media website, and um, they they go in the comment, people read it and go in the comment section. They see 100 comments going, you're full of it. That's just bigotry. That's hate, and explaining why and telling the truth. People notice that. Yeah, you're right, Iron John. Dan, any last words?
Um, Nothing really. Just remember cafe event this Wednesday there. Status of women or status of men Canada. We have status of women Canada already. Do we have is there a need for status of men? Me personally, my take on it is no. We just need a status of humans. We don't need to. We don't need a status for each individual entity. I think we can get by on status of humans, but that's just my take on it. Thanks for joining us, folks, and remember, you can lead a feminist to logic, but you can't make them think, and take the red pill.
Iron John, want to take us out?
Yeah, take the red pill, everyone.